Today, I want to share a little bit about the Earth Day vigil that Venerable Semke and I got to go to on Saturday, and also to emphasize why we need to make Earth Day every day. Earth Day actually started in 1970, and it came from the voice of people really recognizing we needed some environmental protections. And this came from a united voice across both parties. And so both Republicans and Democrats were agreeing that this needed to happen. So it was quite a special time of recognizing that need. And from that, within a couple years, the Environmental Protection Agency was formed, the Clean Water Act was established, and the Endangered Species Act was established. And those have been hugely important in protecting our environment ever since. And so a point that I'm making today is the importance of speaking up and speaking together. The interfaith panel, or the Earth Vigil that we went to, was a group of different faith leaders throughout a wide spectrum of people. It represented the Baha'i faith, Muslim leader, a Hindu representative, Jewish, Christian, and then Buddhist. And it was really beautiful of how everybody came together and talked about, the theme was water, and talked about why water was so important in their faith, and then what we can do to help protect the water as we recognize how important it is for our survival. It is really beautiful seeing that through that joining of different faith leaders who represent a really important ethical voice for their people. They represent the values of a wide spectrum of people, and having that unity with that diversity is very powerful. Yeah, it was really beautiful seeing the respect that each person had for each other, even though we had different views. I mean, we didn't quite, or I didn't quite swallow a lot of the topics on God, but it was also beautiful seeing that we had so much more in common than we had differences. And that was really inspiring and empowering, especially just seeing how much we respected each other for coming together for this one topic, which, I mean, it's a no-brainer. We live on this earth together and we need all these resources together, so we need to work together. So I did a little research on climate change because I've always been cared about the environment. And the Nature Conservancy said that 7 out of 10 people actually believe in climate change. But it's just not getting talked about. And the number one thing to do to help it is to talk about it and to make it a normal thing that we're really recognizing it, and to see what we can do about it, that it's not just a far off thing up to the politicians and leaders, it's up to the people to make the voice heard that this should be our top priority of caring for our planet, because it affects every action of our lives and the lives of so many people. Sociologists have said that it's just like any other big social movement in history: ending slavery, emancipation for the women to have the right to vote, except this time it's global. It's not just a couple countries or suppressed people, it affects the entire world. And it comes from the people. It's not a top-down thing. Sadly, out of the 10% of the world's richest people, they produce 52% of the CO2 in the world. So it's a little top-heavy. And that's usually through flying. Flying is hugely detrimental to the environment because the CO2 and the methane gas is released in the higher atmosphere, where it gets absorbed faster and has a much greater impact. And the poorest people in the world are going to be the hardest hit because they don't have the resources to move, to buy a lot of water. So it's hugely disproportionate about how it's going to impact people. We can look to our greatest heroes in history of Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King. They came from having the courage to speak up. We know them as great leaders and heroes because they spoke up. They didn't go along with the status quo. It came from their love and compassion for people and wanting to relieve suffering that they they did what they had to do and spoke up and even had to sacrifice their lives. But they made huge impacts. They made a difference. And so did the Buddha. I mean, the Buddha, from his wisdom and compassion and love and wanting to relieve suffering, also spoke up. He had to look at the greatest truth of suffering and look into his own mind and see and find the source of the problem. And then he spoke up in a very peaceful way, not in an aggressive, angry way, but just through his own actions, through his own understanding, had a huge impact. I mean, it's still affecting us 2,600 years later through his gentle, peaceful, wise ways of being. This winter, I found a little tea bag, I call them my tea bag wisdoms, that said, love is our greatest strength. And it's through this love of the environment and nature and seeing how beautiful it is, how diverse it is, that we can find that strength to care for it, to have that appreciation and to see how precious it is and how delicate it is, and to really take that time to want to work for it. So I looked up on the Nature Conservancy, they have in saying how important it is to speak up, they have a little document that says how to speak up, because I hate speaking up. But how important that speaking up is, and how it can start with, it doesn't have to be standing out on the streets petitioning like my mom does, but, but it can start with people that you know, maybe that you work with, maybe family members that don't quite have the same beliefs as you, but you have a connection with. And in this document, they say, people often believe a thing not because they know it is true, but because it's what they believe everyone else around them thinks. So we're so easily influenced. We don't really think for ourselves and look at the facts. We believe what other people think. And so if people are saying that climate change is false, they're going to believe that. It's a lot easier to believe that climate change is false than to actually take responsibility for our own actions. But we can recognize how we influence each other and use it in a positive way to really help. So some of their tips is first to meet people where they're at and to truly listen and understand their perspective. Feeling heard and respected is the starting point for opening a conversation, not I'm right, you're wrong. Another point is that connection is more important than facts. And it's just like nonviolent communication. First, we have to identify and connect with the feelings that we're feeling. I mean, people everywhere are recognizing that climate change is real, and to connect with that feeling of fear, sadness, helplessness, and recognizing that we have these shared values, that everybody wants clean water and healthy forests. And so even if people have different understandings of how to care for the environment, we can connect over those shared values and those feelings. And then we can also start with what's happening, the observable facts. Climate change sometimes gets confused because people say, oh, the climate's not getting warmer. We just had a really cold winter and it's still the end of April and we're wearing our jackets and long underwear. But climate change is more, it's called global weirding. It's more extremes. It's higher highs and colder colds, more drought, more rain. It's kind of throwing everything off. And so we can see that on a daily basis. It doesn't take too much to look on that part. His Holiness has a quote that I love that I have on my email. It says, "See things as they are and respond with wisdom and compassion." We have to really see what's happening and then actually respond. We actually have to act and do something about it. And just like the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths, first he saw the suffering and the cause of the suffering, but then he saw that there's a solution and a way to relieve that suffering. And then he taught the path how to do it. And there is a way to stop climate change, but it takes all of us to work on it together. In my life, I've always been passionate about wanting to help the world, and especially saving wildlife and nature. But I've also noticed that I tend to go to the extremes of absolutism or nihilism, of thinking that climate change or saving endangered species is so important, and I have this huge urgency and intensity and anxiety, and so I'm like, okay, I shouldn't drive anywhere, I shouldn't fly anywhere, and I just speak with a lot of anger, and it's a very solid, fixed feeling. Or I'll flip to the other extreme of nihilism and say, oh, it's too late, it's too hard, there's no hope, I might as well go drive 3 hours into the mountains and hike while I can. And so those two ways don't really work. And so staying in the middle way of recognizing that each little action does matter, each tiny little thing. It might not feel like much, but if we all did it, it will add up. Another point that they make in talking to people is that the goal is not, the goal is conversation, is just engaging with people, not conquest. We're not trying to convince people that they're wrong, because when you're having a conversation with people, even if they start gathering new information, we're not going to admit it that we're wrong right away. I'm not going to flip to the other side immediately, but planting those little seeds, making clear points, make a difference. That when other people think that I'm being aggressive and having opposition, they're not going to listen. So we have to come with a place of wanting to connect and share information, and a place of curiosity, of really learning from each other. The fifth point that they make is to focus on the person in front of you, to recognize that they're suffering too, and they're going to be suffering from the effects of climate change just as much as I am. And so again, having that compassion to keep the heart open and to talk to them with respect and kindness will go a lot farther in having a conversation with that person, that they'll maybe be more open to that conversation again in the future. Because the more we talk about it, the more it normalizes it, the more it just brings to mind that this is really happening and other people are talking about it too, so maybe it's actually true. And this is just like our meditation practice, that each day we're familiarizing ourselves little bit by little bit, slowly turning our minds. And so familiarizing ourselves with this new perspective that our actions matter and we do need to do something about it. So what can we do about it? These tiny actions do matter, but the number one is to reduce emissions. CO2 rates are rising, methane is rising, and so we can carpool, which we're trying to do, but it is really important. Even tiny little things like not speeding, taking public transportation, checking the air pressure in your tires, making sure that they're properly inflated, shopping local, supporting local businesses so that we're not shipping things from all over the place and creating a lot of plastic packaging that gets thrown away or burnt, which creates more emissions. If you have to fly, consider making a donation to offset the emissions. There's a lot of really great organizations out there that either plant trees or protect land. And I was thinking that we always complain when the gas prices go high, but we're really not paying the true price of gas. I tried looking up the facts, and I imagine it's probably about, I don't know, I'm sure it's a lot more the price of gas if we actually factored in how much its climate change costs. We'd probably be paying at least $10 or $20 a gallon of gas. So maybe if you're getting really cheap gas right now, consider putting away $1 or $2 per gallon of gas and donating it to an organization where you can actually help offset those costs again. Number two is really conserving land and water. I mean, we keep cutting down the rainforests even though we know how important it is, so that we can have blueberries and raspberries in the wintertime. It was kind of sad to see how much of our produce is coming from Brazil and Peru in the wintertime. And I'm guessing a lot of it's coming from rainforests that are getting cut down, and then because the demand for blueberries in the wintertime is so high, it's worth it to the local people to make that money. We can also, we're all vegetarian here, which is wonderful. And so people at home, if you can eat a little bit less meat, that really makes a difference, because the cattle industry creates the other 25% of our emissions. And either from cows creating methane which is a hotter gas and heats up the environment even faster, combined with the deforestation. So there's a lot of great vegetarian options out there. And I wasn't vegetarian before I moved here, but I don't really miss meat, and there's a lot of great options. So it's easy. It can be a simple little shift. Number 3 is get educated. Learn more about what to do, that there's so many different ways to help, and what issues are actually happening locally and then in your region. Just at the Earth Day event, I was surprised one woman was talking about there's a pipeline that's proposed going right through Spokane. It's already existing, but it's not, it's like 60 years old or something, and so it's really falling apart, but there's, I think, industries from Canada wanting to reopen this pipeline to bring more oil through underneath the Spokane River, right underneath schools, but they don't really want to fix it. They just want to start using it. So things like that, of just being aware of what's happening in your backyard and speaking about it. I mean, we learned from our experience with the smelter. We spoke about it, and it's not happening, so it makes a difference. The other thing is to speak up, contacting local agencies, state and federal level. I've made it a commitment to write at least 1 letter a month. It can be just a stock letter of what I'm thinking and feeling, but putting it out there and being heard is better than not speaking up at all. And of course, the biggest thing we can do is to keep meditating, because that's really going to help us a lot in the long run, of keeping our heart open, keeping our heart balanced, recognizing how we all are connected and that we can make a difference. And just like this interfaith group, we saw that united voices do make a difference and a much greater impact. So the Buddha didn't give up, and so neither should we, in protecting the earth and to help ending suffering for all beings. Thank you.